So when you arrive in the United States in a lot of airports these days, it's not just a passport agent that looks at your passport, there's a camera that can take your picture to confirm your identity.
Every year, hundreds of millions of people travel in and out of the United States. In 2021, U.S. Customs and Border Protection rolled out a biometric program at airports aimed at automating the entry-exit process.
What the photo does, we take images of known persons, people that have either submitted passport photos. So we're doing a match. We take the live photo and compare it to a photo that we already have of the individual.
This is like facial recognition technology.
We call it comparison because when people hear facial recognition, they automatically orient to surveillance.
Sure.
What we do is very distinct from surveillance. It's to enhance security. We've always been getting the biographic data for years. Now we're biometrically confirming that data. We have about 100 million passengers now that have been processed through facial biometric comparison.
If this is 1.0, what does 2.0 look like?
Where we're really working diligently and kind of the final frontier for us is getting it up and running in the vehicle environment at our land border ports of entry. Certainly our southwest border, we can't let bad people and bad things into the country.
As migrants cross in record numbers, the border between the U.S. and Mexico is where U.S. Customs and Border Protection rolls out its most innovative technology.
Just being here is an act of defiance.
Why is that?
Because the government is hell-bent on keeping people off the river. They don't want anyone here to observe and document what they're doing. So, at either end of the wall, there are little outposts like National Guard or observation towers. And then there's those big surveillance towers. The raid towers are replacing all of these little ones. You can see some of the relays on the telephone poles and the omnidirectional antenna sticking out of a tree, different things like that as we head upriver.
Mariano Trevino Wright is the executive director of the National Butterfly Center in Mission, Texas, which sits on the Rio Grande, directly across from Mexico. She's a U.S. citizen, but because Mariana lives and works near the border, she lives under the thumb of CBP and Border Patrol.
You guys called the station recently?
No, sir, we didn't. So they just did that to get their own video of all of you.
Mariana might sound alarmist, but the jurisdiction of CBP doesn't just apply to migrants or those living along the border. It extends 100 miles inland, leaving 2/3 of the U.S. population susceptible to potential surveillance. Mariana herself has found multiple cameras and recording devices on her property.
You suspect they're collecting information about you?
I know they're collecting information about everyone. In about 2014, 2015, I could hear clicking in and out of my cell phone. And I told my husband, I think they're listening to my cell phone calls out on the border. And then not long after that, they produced all the documents attesting to the fact that they were doing exactly that.
Just by virtue of living near the border, you're subject to all this surveillance. Without any consent, without any due cause or warrants or things like that.
Without any of that.
I mean, this sounds like a civil liberties nightmare.
It's very stressful. I mean, the harassment is everywhere.
You look at a country like China that has technological tracking of all of its citizens, facial recognition technology, social scores, all of these things. And I think people are the United States is never gonna be like China like that.
No, we absolutely will.
That sounds really scary. How scared should we be about this? Because there's this fine line, right, between fact-based vigilance and a little bit of paranoia. And hearing from you, I don't know which side of the line to land on.
I don't know that it does any good to be scared.
Mm-hmm.
People need to become well-informed, and they need to be courageous enough to act.
Surveillance has already moved beyond the borderlands, from CBP-deployed drones at BLM protests to a Homeland Security secret list of journalists and human rights lawyers. The watchers are being watched. But the greatest threat isn't the visible technologies themselves. It's how the information they capture is analyzed. Palantir Technologies is one of the most prominent players in the field of data analytics, and they're behind some of the government's most high-profile missions. The company is rumored to have helped execute the capture of Osama bin Laden, and their software powered some of the largest deportation raids in U.S. history. It was founded in 2004 by PayPal billionaire Peter Thiel.
We cannot let free market ideology serve as an excuse for decline.
Thiel and fellow Palantir founder Joe Lonsdale are among the Silicon Valley ultra-rich. They claim staunch libertarian views and promote American exceptionalism and dominance, particularly over China.
We're also a nation that has very different values than China. It is important that we stay ahead of them in defense and ahead of them in AI.
Palantir employees rarely speak publicly about their time and work at the company, but former engineer Philip Sufitsky wants to demystify the capabilities of the software.
Part of working at Palantir, they felt it was very important that everybody knew what the software was well enough that if somebody asked about it, you could give them a overview or a sales pitch.
Yeah. What's the pitch?
The way I try to explain it to people, if you think about any sort of crime procedural, they always have this big cork board. And they've got note cards, they've got pictures, they've got newspaper clippings, etc. But if you had a cork board that's 1 million feet wide, that's Palantir. That's the trend of the world in general. It's very much trending towards people are data points.
In 2004, Thiel was the first to invest in another little venture called Facebook. As we all eagerly signed up for this new mode of connection, the company revolutionized how our personal data is bought, sold, and shared.
But we're not talking about like selling me jeans on Instagram here.
No.
We're talking about using state power.
You need to know that if it's law enforcement, if it's a regulatory agency, whatever data it can collect and does collect will be analyzed more efficiently than before. It's a lot of power for people with the data and with the analytics tools to have over individuals.
Companies like Palantir are revolutionizing how our data is used by the government. And now across the country, surveillance technology is being welcomed with open arms to combat crime, enhance public safety, and even to track the spread of COVID-19. Peachtree Corners, just outside Atlanta, is a city of just 40,000. But since the 1960s, the community's leaders have envisioned it would be a hub for technological innovation. Today, the city has its own Curiosity Labs, which is a testing site for companies to develop tech like solar-powered scooters and driverless cars.
All right, show me your techno car.
All right.
And so you're testing out how the road can talk to the car and the car can talk to the road.
That's exactly right. So every time we hear one of those, that's a SPAT message. It gives us some kind of indication of what's going on at intersections and any place we have roadside units. And so in the future, whether it's through smartwatches, phones, any kind of application, they can all eventually talk to each other as this technology gets expanded. So we were just transmitted a green light. This is another car was approaching. Again, the green light.
Here's a dumb question, but why do we want to do this?
We want to do it again just to enhance vehicular and pedestrian safety.
Do you think this is like what the world's gonna look like in like 5 years?
For better or for worse, I think this is kind of an inevitable direction of where everything is going.
Peachtree Corners says they only adopt the best and most secure of these prototype technologies. And in 2020, it rolled out Flock Safety, a product that uses cameras and machine learning to read license plates. Flock stores the data for 30 days before wiping it and can alert law enforcement if the car is connected to a crime through a hot list, a database of vehicles with outstanding warrants and alerts. Flock says the cities they partner with usually see a dramatic decrease in crime.
We've been very successful here in Peachtree Corners. We rolled out 25 of them, successfully solved 2 homicides, and recovered over $1 million in stolen property by the use of this technology.
But this is a technology where you might put a camera somewhere that isn't as visible.
Correct.
So you might not even know as you're going through it that your location is being recorded.
Yeah, but again, if we have nothing wrong, nothing to do, it just gets wiped from the file because nobody wants Big Brother. That's not the goal.
Nobody wants Big Brother, but sometimes it just happens by like, like I'm wowed by this and I think it's amazing, but I also
have that lingering thought.
What are we doing here?
Yeah, I get it. The approach we've taken is to be communicative about this throughout the entire process. Like, we don't access this as a government. This is strictly for our law enforcement officers.
But Flock safety isn't just for law enforcement. Much like Amazon Ring, anyone can buy the technology.
What data can they see? Do they have access to this kind of dashboard?
So,
To the hot list, to like all these sorts of things?
no, so they have very stripped down service, which I think is another important step because, yeah, we could have the Wild West out here if our
spy on your neighbors.
HOAs were, yeah, exactly.
So let me help you out with that.
Yep.
So they're the same features you have. They can search their camera and see all the images that have came in, like my neighborhood has it.
So you can still see the license plate.
My neighborhood.
Okay. So they do see the license plates that enter their neighborhood, but they don't see like the hot list.
But still, like, I can basically know when my neighbors are coming and going. I mean, in the same... like,
Good. Yeah. Yeah.
that's a little nuts.
It's how we use it. That's what it comes down to, right? Trust in the public good, think good before bad. And we have to have some level of trust with our fellow citizens.
Trusting your neighbor is one thing, but increasingly privately owned cameras are being fed into larger, more powerful surveillance systems. Take Atlanta. As part of an initiative known as Operation Shield, the Atlanta Police Department has integrated more than 10,000 cameras from both government and private citizens into its system to monitor for crimes. The number of cameras per capita has made Atlanta the only U.S. city to make the top 10 list of most surveilled cities in the world. Almost all the others are in China.
Are there privacy concerns here? Because it does seem like this is a highly powerful tool to be able to see so much all the time.
For us, the privacy concern is just really not there because, again, our residents in the city of Atlanta have really shown in a huge way that they are accepting of the technology and they frankly want more of it.
Are there any safeguards in place to prevent the kind of omniscient, artificial intelligent future? Kind of the same way like we all gave our data to like Facebook and Amazon and stuff, and now we're like, oh, that didn't work out great. How do we know that that's safeguarded for the future?
It boils down to leadership. So it's the leadership of the department and the leadership of the program.
Atlanta's leaders have contracted with several predictive policing and surveillance technology companies, including Flock. And leaders across the country and the political spectrum tend to agree that connecting local, state, and federal surveillance networks is essential for national security. It's a post-9/11 lesson that Silicon Valley is cashing in on. Take Palantir. Since going public in 2020, the company's valuation has nearly tripled to about $45 billion. Founders Peter Thiel and Joe Lonsdale have gone on to invest in many of the buzziest surveillance companies, all feeding off the bipartisan push to dredge data from U.S. citizens. But is Silicon Valley's move fast, break things ethos running roughshod over constitutionally protected privacy? Palantir did not respond to a request for participation. Flock responded to our questions by emphasizing their strict privacy policies, no facial recognition, and a commitment to never sell or share data, and that encouraging neighborhoods to share their cameras with law enforcement helps public safety remain in the hands of professionals. Andrew Ferguson is a law professor who's sounding the alarm on how this venture-funded cottage industry could be setting the stage for an American-style autocracy.
The collection of sort of public data about you and about me is largely unregulated. And so if a government wanted to start taking the data that's available in the world and centralize it and make it usable, which is exactly what Palantir and other companies like Palantir can do, it's obviously troubling because it's centralizing power in a government in a way that we've never seen before in the US.
The argument against that would be like, well, China's not thinking about that. So
They're not, and they're not.
To keep up, we just got to keep keeping up.
But that only is good if your goal is to have the best surveillance state. If you want to be more, George Orwell, 1984, you want to be more authoritarian. Yeah, I don't want that race. I'd rather lose that race.
But in a world where intentions are good, can this technology still result in bad outcomes?
I think a better way to think about it is to begin with the recognition that this technology will always be misused. You got to assume the tyrant. Let's assume that every technology we build, every database, every facial recognition system, everything we're using is going to be misused by this metaphorical tyrant. And we need to think that way before we adopt these technologies in our communities.
But whether it's knocking on your neighbor's door or even just turning on your phone, the tools of surveillance are never far behind and always at our fingertips. And the power of this technology only grows as Silicon Valley pushes innovation and federal agencies adopt it.
Through the surveillance they've installed, through their physical presence, there's been this creeping, and pushing the limits of what they are legally entitled to do.
Which means it's deployed against you.
Against me, against you, against everybody. It is indiscriminate.
If they're listening right now, what's your message?
Fuck off.